Today we are going to start introduction of drugs acting on central nervous system, and Professor Dr. Muhammad Naeem Iqbal is going to deliver and to discuss with you, inshallah. Drugs acting in the CNS or central nervous system were among the first to be discovered by primitive humans and are still the most widely used group of pharmacological agents. These include medication used to treat a wide range of neurologic and psychiatric conditions, as well as drugs that relieve pain, suppress nausea, and reduce fever, among other symptoms. In addition, many CNS acting drugs are used widely and without prescription to increase the sense of well-being. So the drugs, they are used on CNS, and just to revise what you have already, the organization of the CNS or central nervous system. The central nervous system comprises the brain and spinal cord and is responsible for integrating sensory information and generating motor input and other behaviors needed to successfully interact with the environment and enhance species survival. The human brain contains about 100 billion interconnected neurons, 100 billion interconnected neurons surrounded by various supporting glial cells. Throughout the CNS, neurons are either clustered into groups called nuclei or are present in layered structures such as the cerebellum and hippocampus. Connection among neurons, both within and between these clusters, form the circuitry that regulates information flow through the CNS. Neurons are electrically excitable cells that process and transmit information via an electrochemical process. There are many types of neurons in the CNS, and they are classified in the following ways: by function, by location, and by neurotransmitter they release. The typical neurons possess a cell body which is called soma and a specialized processes called dendrites and axons. Dendrites, which form highly branched complex dendritic trees, receive and integrate the input from other neurons and conduct this information to the cell body. The axon carries the output signal of the neuron from the cell body, sometimes over long distances. Neurons may have hundreds of dendritic, but generally have only one axon. Though axons may branch distally to contact multiple targets, the axons terminals make contact with other neurons as specialized junctions called synapses, where neurotransmitter chemicals are released that interact with receptors on other neurons. Then neuroglia. In addition to neurons, there are large number of non-neuronal support cells called neuroglia or glia that perform a variety of essential functions in the CNS. Astrocytes are the most abundant glial cells in the brain and play homeostatic support role, including providing metabolic nutrients to the neurons and maintaining extracellular ion concentrations. In addition, astrocyte processes are closely associated with neuronal synapses where they are involved in removal and recycling of neurotransmitters after release and play increasingly appreciated roles in regulating neurotransmission. Next, oligodendrocytes are cells that wrap around the axons of the projections neurons in the CNS, forming the myelin sheath. Similar to the Schwann cells in peripheral neurons, the myelin sheath created by oligodendrocytes insulate the axons and increases the spread of signal propagation. Damage to oligodendrocytes occur in multiple sclerosis and thus is the target of drug discovery efforts. Then comes microglia are the specialized macrophages derived from the bone marrow that are found in the CNS and are major immune defense mechanism in the brain. These cells are actively involved in neuroinflammatory process in many pathological states, including neurodegenerative diseases. Then very important part of function of the brain is a blood-brain barrier. Blood-brain barrier is a protective functional separation of the circulating blood from the extracellular fluid of the CNS that limit the penetration of substances including the drugs. This separation is accomplished by the presence of tight junction between the capillary endothelial cells as well as the surrounding layer of astrocyte and feet. Therefore, to enter the CNS, drug must either be highly hydrophobic or engage a specific transport mechanism. For example, the second generation antihistamines cause less drowsiness because they are developed to be significantly more polar than older antihistamines, limiting their crossing the blood-brain barrier. Many nutrients such as glucose and essential amino acids have specific transporters that allow them to cross the blood-brain barrier. For example, levodopa or L-dopa, a precursor of the neurotransmitter dopamine, can enter the brain using an amino acid transporter, whereas dopamine cannot cross blood-brain barrier. Thus, an orally administered drug, levodopa, but not dopamine, can be used to boost CNS dopamine levels in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. Some parts of the brain, the so-called circumventricular organs, lack a normal blood-brain barrier. These include regions that sample the blood, such as the area postrema, vomiting center, and region that secrete neurohormones into the circulation. Now we are going to discuss this diagram or the picture which is showing you ion channels and the neurotransmitter receptors. You can see here they are in the neuronal membrane. The neurons contain two types of channels defined on the basis of mechanisms controlling their gating, which mean opening and closing. Number one are the voltage gated and ligand gated channels. Voltage gated channels respond to change in the membrane potential of the cell. In this diagram, you can see voltage gated sodium channels in the heart, which we have already, we know how the sodium channels they are controlled. In nerve cells, these channels are highly concentrated on the initial segment of the axon, which initiates the all or nothing fast action potential and along the length of the axon, where they propagate the action potential to the nerve terminal. So there are also many types of voltage sensitive calcium and potassium channels on the cell body, dendrites and initial segment, which act on much slower time scale and modulate the rate at which the neuron discharge. The neurotransmitters exert their effects on the neuron by binding to the two distinct classes of receptor. The first class is referred to be ligand-gated channels, which are called inotropic receptors. These receptors consist of multiple subunits and binding of the neurotransmitters. Ligand directly open the channels, which is an integral part of the receptor complex. These channels are insensitive or only weakly sensitive to membrane potential, which we can see in diagram B, ligand-gated ion channels. Activation of these channels typically result in a brief or, for example, few milliseconds to tens of milliseconds opening of the channels. Ligand-gated channels are responsible for fast synaptic transmission, typically of hierarchical pathways in the CNS. The second type of neurotransmitter receptors is referred to be metabotropic receptors. You can see in this diagram C and D. There are 7 transmembrane G protein coupled receptors of a type described in previously. The binding of the neurotransmitter to the type of receptors does not result in the direct gating of the channel. Rather, binding to the receptor engage a G protein, which results in production of second messengers that mediate intracellular signaling cascade. In the neuron, activation of metabotropic neurotransmitter receptors often lead to the modulation of voltage-gated channels. These interactions can occur entirely within the plane of membrane, and they are referred to be as membrane delimited pathway, which is shown in diagram D. In this case, the G protein, often a beta-gamma subunit, interacts directly with the voltage-gated ion channels. In general, 2 types of voltage-gated ion channels are the target of this type of signaling, calcium channels and potassium channels. When G protein interact with calcium channels, they inhibit channel functions. This mechanism accounts for the inhibition of neurotransmitter release that occur when presynaptic metabotropic receptors are activated. In contrast, when these receptors are postsynaptic, they activate, cause the opening of potassium channels, resulting in a slow postsynaptic inhibition. Metabotropic receptors can also modulate voltage-gated channels less directly by generation of diffusible second messengers. A classical example of this type of action is provided by beta adrenoceptor, which generate cyclic AMP via activation of adenylyl cyclase, whereas the membrane delimited action occur within microdomains in the membrane. Second messenger mediated effects can occur over considerable distances. Finally, an important consequence of involvement of G protein is in the receptor signaling is that, in contrast to the brief effect of inotropic receptor, the effect of metabotropic receptors activation can last tens of seconds to minutes. Metabotropic receptors predominate in the diffuse neuronal system in the CNS. This slide shows you some of the toxins which are present in the plants and different animals like fish, frog, scorpions and snake, which are going to act on these ion channels, voltage gated channels, sodium channels, potassium channel and calcium channels, and different modes of these toxins which they are going to either activate or going to block, and then ligand gated channels, nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, GABA receptors and glycine receptors. These are by different plants and animals how they are being blocked, and they are going to show these toxins. They are going to show you by blocking these ligand gated channels. So this is a slide just to give you a picture how different toxins they are going to act by either activating or blocking these channels. This diagram is showing you on the left side how the excitable synaptic potential and spike generation is by action of different agents, how they are going to show you the response. That the figure shows entry of a microelectrode into a postsynaptic cell and subsequent recording of resting membrane potential of minus 70 millivolt. Stimulation of an excitatory pathway, which is shown by E, generates transient depolarization, increasing the stimulus strength. Second E increases the size of the depolarization so that the threshold for spike generation is reached, and that will give you the response. So this is how different agents they are going to show you the excitatory by increasing EP mean excitatory postsynaptic potential. So this is how, and on the right side you can see interaction of excitatory and inhibitory synapses. Suprathreshold on the left side, you can see suprathreshold stimulus is given to an excitatory pathway and an action potential is evoked. On the right side you see that in this diagram the same stimulus is given shortly after activating an inhibitory pathway, which is shown by I, which results in an inhibitory postsynaptic potential that prevents the excitatory potential from reaching the threshold. That means it has made the resting membrane potential to more negative. So even the same stimulus which showed you the response now cannot give you the response because it has taken this resting membrane potential to even more negativity. So this is how the action potential and synaptic potential, they are by different agents, they are by inhibitory and excitatory, how they are going to activate the neurons and how they are going to show you the response. In this slide you can see that the sites of drug action, schematic diagram of the steps at which the drugs can alter synaptic transmission. At site 1 you can see that is action potential in the presynaptic fiber. Then at the level of number 2 is the synthesis of transmitters. So if you disturb this synthesis or you increase the synthesis of neurotransmitter, that can affect the transmission. Third is the storage of neurotransmitter in the storage vesicle. So if that is affected, that is going to decrease the release of the neurotransmitters. The fourth stage is metabolism. After release, the neurotransmitter has to be metabolized. So if you inhibit the metabolism of the neurotransmitter, that is going to increase the effect of the neurotransmitter. The fifth side is the release. So if you inhibit the release of the neurotransmitter, that is going to decrease the response. And sixth site is reuptake. After release, the drug or the neurotransmitter has to be either there is a metabolism or degradation, or there is a reuptake of the neurotransmitter. So if you can inhibit by help of the drugs, the reuptake is inhibited, that is going to increase the response of the neurotransmitter. Or the seventh site is degradation, metabolism by monoamine oxidase or any other enzyme. So if you inhibit this metabolizing enzyme, which is going to degrade the neurotransmitter, that is going to enhance the effect of the neurotransmitter. Then the eighth site is the site or postsynaptic site, a receptor of the transmitter. So either you can by activation or by action of these neurotransmitters on the receptor, that is going to give you the response. Then ninth is receptors induce increase or decrease in ionic conductance. So these are 9 different sites where you can modify the response of the neurotransmitter with the help of the drugs. We'll discuss in detail when we'll discuss different drugs and how they are acting, the mechanisms, how they are going to be beneficial. Most of the neuronal system in the CNS can be divided into 2 broad categories: hierarchical systems and non-specific or diffuse neuronal systems. In this diagram, the pathway of central nervous system pathway in the central nervous system. A shows parts of 3 relay neurons colored and 2 types of inhibitory pathways, recurrent and feed forward. The inhibitory neurons are shown in gray. Diagram B shows the pathway responsible for presynaptic inhibition, in which the axon of an inhibitory neuron, gray colored synapse on axon terminal on an excitatory fiber, which is shown colored. So this is how hierarchical system is going to control the activity of the neurons, while non-specific or diffuse neuronal system containing many of the other neurotransmitters, including the monoamines and acetylcholine, they diffuse in fundamental ways from the hierarchical system. These neurotransmitters are produced by only a limited number of neurons whose cell bodies are located in small discrete nuclei, often in the brainstem. For example, noradrenergic cell bodies are found primarily in the compact cell group called a locus coeruleus, located in the caudal pontine central gray matter, and number only approximately 1500 neurons on each side of the brain in red. However, from these limited nuclei, these neurons project widely and diffusely throughout the brain and spinal cord. So that means they are the neurotransmitters, they are produced from the specific nuclei and then they spread to the other areas of the brain. The anatomical are the position where they are mainly released, and then the receptors like acetylcholine, for example, has muscarinic 1 and muscarinic 2 and nicotinic receptors. Then dopamine has D1 to D2, D3, and GABA A and GABA B, and then glutamate, NMDA or AMPA. These are canic acid, and these are different receptors which are being activated or inhibited, and then the mechanism how these receptors, when they are being activated, what they are going to cause. Like for example, acetylcholine, when it is M1, they are stimulated, that is excitatory, and that is going to increase. There is a excitatory, that is there is a decrease in potassium conductance, and there is increased production of N-acetyl triphosphate or IP3 or DAG or diacylglycerol. While M2 they are inhibitory, and there is increased conductance of potassium, and there is decreased production of cyclic AMP. So this is how these receptors at the different sites, when they are being stimulated by different these neurotransmitters, acetylcholine, dopamine, GABA, glutamate, like for example GABA and glycine, they are inhibitory neurotransmitters, and glycine is mainly in the spinal cord and interneurons and some of the brain stem interneurons, and strychnine, which is a spinal cord convulsant, are due to inhibition of this glycine, it is going to cause convulsions because it is blocked by strychnine. And GABA is a inhibitory neurotransmitter mainly in the CNS, supraspinal and spinal interneurons involved in pre and postsynaptic inhibition. And the mechanism is mainly it's inhibitory, and there is increased chloride conductance. So that is going. Secondly, also they can inhibit the presynaptic release of calcium conductance, and inhibitory postsynaptic, and there is increased potassium conductance. So this is how these different neurotransmitters, how they are going to be showing their effects. And these two slides, they are giving you the rough idea how these neurotransmitters, when they are released in different sites, in different parts of the brain, how they are going to be effective, and they are going to show you the response. And if you block their effects by giving antagonists, how they are going to antagonize the effect of these, for example, opioid peptides, and they are going to act through mu and delta and kappa receptors, and their antagonists, if you see the naloxone is specific antagonist for all these receptors. So this is how if you know the site and how their antagonists, they are going to block, you can antagonize the effect of these neurotransmitters and these effects. So this is a general introduction of CNS, and now we'll inshallah go for the specific diseases and how they are being rectified by use of different drugs.